All right, so we're diving into this whole work-life balance thing. And honestly, who isn't trying to figure that out? We're going to take a deep dive into this podcast episode called The Balance Between Perspective
Oh, interesting.
to see if we can kind of crack the code on work-life balance.
Yeah, it's funny how we think of balance as like this rigid split, right? Like
Yeah.
50% work, 50% life.
Yeah.
But that's not realistic.
No.
The podcast hosts really focus on this idea of it being more about flexibility
Right.
and being able to adjust your priorities as needed.
Yeah, it's like trying to balance on one foot and juggle at the same time. Like, it's just not going to work.
Right.
I heard someone describe it more like a tightrope walker,
Okay.
constantly making these little tiny adjustments to stay up.
Oh, that's good.
So, like, maybe some days work needs a little more attention, and some days it's family.
Yeah, I love that analogy because it really highlights how balance is a process and not a destination.
Yeah.
And it's not a one-time thing.
No.
And, another thing that makes it difficult is that we live in this always-on culture.
Oh, yeah.
With technology, it makes it so hard to disconnect
It really does.
from work.
I feel like my phone is like part of my body now, you know?
Yeah,
It's like attached.
I know it is.
Even when I'm not technically working, there's still that pressure
Yeah.
to check emails and respond to messages.
Well, the podcast hosts talk about that.
Yeah.
They talk about how technology has really blurred those lines
Right.
between work life and personal time.
Yeah.
And it's created this expectation
Yeah.
that we're always available.
Right.
So it's no wonder people are feeling burnt out.
And then there's that pressure to do it all.
Yes.
Like, I have to have a career and a social life and a side hustle, and I need
Yeah.
to work out and eat healthy and do self-care.
Yes. And
Uh-huh.
sometimes self-care can feel like just another thing on your to-do list.
Oh, totally.
Right.
It's like another chore instead of a way to take care of yourself.
Exactly. It's like, ugh, I have to do this too.
Right. I read this article the other day, and they were talking about thinking of it as energy management. Oh, interesting.
Instead of self-care.
Okay.
So the idea is to focus on things that give you energy
I love that.
and not just add more to your plate.
It really reframes it
Yeah.
in a way that is less about obligation and more about sustainability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like instead of beating yourself up for not doing an hour of yoga, maybe just take 5 minutes to meditate.
Absolutely. Or go for a walk outside in nature.
Exactly. Just something small.
You know, it's finding what works for you,
Yeah.
not trying to fit in with what you think you should be doing.
Right. And that brings us to what the podcast really focuses on, which is setting boundaries,
Yes.
which everybody says to do. But how do you actually do that?
It's tough. It's tough, especially when you have a job where there's always more work to do.
Yeah.
But they gave a few good tips, like setting specific times
Okay.
to check your emails
Yeah.
and stick to them.
Oh, so you're not constantly being reactive. You're more proactive.
Yes, exactly.
You're choosing when you deal with it,
And another big thing is learning to say no.
which can be really difficult.
Yes, especially if you're a people pleaser.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah.
But they had some advice for that too, like starting small,
Okay.
like practicing saying no to small requests,
Right.
and then you can work your way up.
Build up that no muscle.
Yeah, and be firm and direct, and don't feel like you have to over-explain yourself.
Right.
Like sometimes it's okay to just say, I can't take that on right now.
Right.
You don't need to give a novel.
So it seems like setting boundaries is really more about like a mindset shift.
Absolutely.
It's recognizing that your time and your energy are valuable
Right.
and that it's okay to put yourself first.
Yes, it's reclaiming your time and energy.
Even if it means saying no to things that you previously felt like you had to do.
Yeah, and making choices that are in line with your values.
Right. It seems like we're moving away from this idea of work-life balance
Yes,
and more towards work-life harmony,
I like that.
which feels less rigid.
Yes,
It's more about making everything work together.
I agree. The podcast even suggests replacing the word balance with harmony.
Okay.
And that implies that it's about finding a rhythm
Yeah.
where different aspects of your life can coexist.
So it's not about compartmentalizing.
Right.
It's more like finding that flow where things ebb and flow.
Exactly.
Right.
And a key ingredient in all of this seems to be self-awareness.
Oh, yeah.
Being aware of your limits, your energy levels,
Right.
knowing when to step back and take a break.
So it's like an internal check-in
Yes,
where you're like, how am I doing? What do I need right now?
exactly. Which can be difficult in our go-go-go society.
It really can.
It feels like we're always being told to do more, be more, achieve more.
Oh, totally.
No wonder we feel overwhelmed and out of balance.
So we really have to challenge those expectations.
I do.
And define what success means to us.
Exactly. Success and fulfillment.
Not what society tells us it should be.
Right. It's about creating a life that feels authentic and meaningful
Right.
to you.
This is giving me so much to think about already.
Me too.
I'm starting to realize that maybe this whole work-life balance thing is more of an ongoing process
Yeah,
than just a state of perfect equilibrium.
it is.
It's about awareness adjustment
Yes.
and making choices that reflect what we value.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
And the good news is that even small changes can make a big difference.
Totally.
It's just about taking those first steps
Okay.
towards a more harmonious life.
This has been so insightful already.
It has.
But before we get too into the solutions, I think we need to address burnout.
Yes.
What happens when you're already fried?
Yeah, we've talked about aiming for this work-life harmony, but what about when you're already feeling the effects of not having it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We'll be getting into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good. So we talked about work-life harmony and how tough it can be, but what about when we're already feeling it?
Yeah, like when you're in the thick of it, already burnt out.
The podcast hosts spend a good chunk of time on this, actually.
Oh, good, because I need help with that.
They talk about recognizing the early signs of burnout.
Okay, so not just when you're completely fried.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like before you reach that point of no return.
So beyond just feeling like I'm fueled by caffeine and anxiety?
Yeah. Like, have you noticed any changes in your sleep?
Maybe.
Are you having trouble focusing,
Yeah, sometimes.
feeling more irritable,
Oh, definitely.
or even cynical or detached from your work?
Okay, so if I start yelling at my plants for not growing fast enough, that's a sign.
Could be. It's about noticing those shifts
Okay.
in your mood and energy.
So the sooner you catch it,
The better.
the easier it is to fix.
They also talked about figuring out the root cause of the burnout.
So not just slapping on a Band-Aid.
Right. Is it a lack of boundaries? Too much work?
Ooh, what if it's the work itself?
That's a big one. And they do address it.
Like, what if I'm just not passionate about it anymore?
Right. Sometimes burnout is a sign that it's time for a change.
Like a career change.
It could be. It can feel scary.
Yeah, a little bit.
But they see it as an opportunity.
Okay.
Burnout can be like a push to reevaluate
Yeah.
and find something that you really love.
So it's not always a bad thing.
Exactly. It's like a wake-up call.
A chance to kind of realign.
And it goes back to that idea of harmony.
Right. It's not about separating work and life. It's about your whole life.
Feeling fulfilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the big picture stuff. But what about while you're in it?
They had tips for that too. Like, first off, self-compassion, beating yourself up for feeling burnt out
Yeah.
just makes it worse.
So no more, I should be handling this better.
Right. You're not a robot.
True.
It's okay to not be okay.
I think everyone needs to hear that.
For sure. On the practical side, they suggest setting realistic goals,
Okay.
saying no, which we talked about, and prioritizing tasks.
Task prioritization. That's my weakness.
They recommend breaking big tasks down
Okay.
to smaller chunks.
Okay, that feels more manageable.
Right. And you get those little wins along the way.
Yeah, I can do that. What about saying no? Any extra tips for that?
Practice with small things first.
Okay.
And then, when you do say no, be clear and firm,
Okay.
but no guilt trips.
So no long excuses.
Exactly. It's your time.
Yeah.
You have the right to say no.
Yeah.
And they also talk about your support system.
Like actually asking for help.
Yes. Having people to talk to, whether it's friends, family, colleagues,
Okay.
make a huge difference.
Yeah, you're right. We don't have to do this alone. Okay, so this is all good. But I'm still a little skeptical about this whole harmony thing.
I get it. It's not magic. It takes work.
Yeah, and it feels like society makes it even harder.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's this pressure to be productive,
Yes. And successful. And never show weakness.
which the podcast actually talks about more. We'll get into that next time.
Oh, a cliffhanger. Can't wait.
All right, so we've talked about a lot with this work-life harmony thing.
Yeah, the challenges, burnout,
Mm-hmm.
boundaries, self-care.
Even career changes.
Yeah.
But like we said last time, there's something bigger at play here.
Yeah, like those societal expectations.
Exactly. That make it even harder to find harmony.
It's like there's this invisible script telling us how much we should be working, how successful we should be, and how busy we should be all the time.
And the podcast host called that out too. It's not just us. It's the whole culture around work that needs to change.
Okay, so where do we even start with that when it feels like everyone's just on this hamster wheel of hustle?
Well, they had a few ideas. One is that we glorify being busy.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's like a badge of honor.
Like, the more stressed you are, the more important you must be.
Right, so you never feel like you can actually say no or take a break.
Exactly. Because then you're not hustling hard enough.
I tried this experiment where I stopped answering "How are you?" with "busy."
Really?
It was so weird at first,
No.
but kind of freeing.
That's awesome. And it goes with what the hosts were saying about focusing on quality over quantity.
Not just how much you do, but how well you do it.
And whether it aligns with what matters to you.
So it's about being more intentional with your time and energy.
Right. And sometimes that means saying no, even when it feels wrong.
Which brings us to another big thing they talked about, work and our identity.
Oh, yeah. It's like our jobs define us.
You go to a party and the first question is, what do you do?
Right. Like that tells me everything I need to know about you.
And then it's easy to feel like your worth is tied to your job title.
Or how productive you are. The host said we need to separate those things.
Like finding value outside of work.
Exactly. Whether it's hobbies, relationships, creative stuff, things that make you happy regardless of your career.
So reminding yourself that you're a whole person, not just a worker.
Exactly. Okay, but what about that pressure to always want more?
Yes. Never feeling content with what you've achieved.
The never enough mentality.
It's exhausting. There's
Yes.
always another goal, another promotion.
The host said this is a big part of burnout and unhappiness.
Makes sense. So how do we stop doing that?
They said we have to redefine success for ourselves.
Not based on what other people think.
Or what society tells us.
So maybe it's about experiences instead of things.
Or personal growth instead of climbing the ladder.
Whatever feels meaningful to you.
Right? Even if it looks different from what everyone else is doing.
It's like those perfect social media feeds make it seem like everyone has it figured out.
And then we compare ourselves and feel bad.
Totally. But the hosts reminded us that everyone's different.
What works for one person might not work for another.
So no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. It's about what feels authentic and fulfilling to you.
And maybe letting go of some of those expectations.
You're allowed to make your own path, even if it's different.
I'm realizing this work-life harmony thing is less about finding perfect balance.
And more about constantly questioning and adjusting.
Making choices that feel right.
It's about awareness, intentionality.
Challenging the status quo.
And maybe if we all do that individually, it'll start to shift things for everyone.
That would be amazing. A world where being busy isn't a badge of honor. And success is about how happy you are, not just what you achieve.
So to wrap up, I want to leave you with this. If work-life harmony is about creating a life that feels good, what does that actually mean to you?
What brings you joy and energy and a sense of purpose?
What changes can you make, even small ones, to prioritize those things?
It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And even small steps in the right direction can make a big difference.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you some things to think about and maybe some ideas to try.
And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all figuring it out together.
So be kind to yourself, keep questioning, keep experimenting, and keep working towards that work-life harmony, or whatever that looks like for you.